Good morning, everybody. Hey, it's Mike Brennan with Keller Williams coming at you with another Saturday Q&A. First, I got to apologize for being a few minutes late there. We're actually at a real estate conference. We're taking back off today to get home, Austin, myself, and Sadie. And honestly, I think Derek thought that I wasn't going to do one today. And Austin's working on checkout, so he might join us in just a little bit here. But we're here in Las Vegas. Vegas, baby, Vegas, which is awesome, by the way. The weather is probably much better than home. I'm guessing. If anybody knows what the Michigan weather is right now, what I'm flying into here in a little bit, please put it in the chat. I want to have some reasonable expectation of how cold it actually is, and if it snowed. Now, that said, we are at this real estate conference. We are taking off today. I just checked out of the hotel room, so I'm in actually a very loud lobby. If anybody comes to Vegas, especially during like maybe a late April or a May, this Green Valley Ranch is definitely worth checking out. It's a resort that's actually way off the strip. It's kind of a self-contained resort area, so it's not so much. There's an attached casino, but it's not so much geared towards gambling, like a lot of places are. Mainly just because I'm not a big gambler. It's not my thing. Oh, 36. Oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this. It was not 36 when I left. But I got to give props. Like this Green Valley Ranch, they did a really nice job. This customer service is great. Not expensive. Compared to some of the other places, definitely not overly expensive, but worth going to. So this week, Austin, Sadie, and myself flew down for a real estate conference. And we're with Keller Williams, as many of you know. This one is brand agnostic. So we had brands there. It's supposed to be a real nice day. Of course it is, Mark. Of course it is. Any day the green wins, I hear is a great day, unless you're a Michigan fan. And then if you're a U of M fan, that's 36 and cloudy and probably snowing. But anyway, we are at this real estate conference put on by our coach, John Chiplak. It is brand agnostic. We have people here from Keller Williams, from RE/MAX, from DXP, from Better Homes and Gardens, from pretty much every brand imaginable. And we also had people, which this was actually very interesting. We had people across many different sizes of business and from across all 50 states and Canada for that matter, which is cool. This conference was more looking into 2022, trying to do a little bit of forecasting, not only with the real estate market, but the economic market and what we need to do to position our teams to have a competitive edge for our buyers and for our sellers coming up this year. As you guys know, it's been a hell of a year, both last year and this year with the real estate markets. And I think my take on it is, and when the room was split about 50-50, but my take on it is we're not done with it being a very tumultuous market, if that makes sense. And again, everybody, throw your questions in the chat. Austin's probably going to join us here in a little bit. There we go. And to give you a little bit of background, or to give you a little bit of background on how we got here. And actually, I'm going to go a little deeper than normal on the economic side, but I'll be brief. So our current Fed chairman, pre-COVID, had steadily tried to raise interest rates, right? So we had gone from 3.9 to 4 to 4.25, and he was trying to put, Jerome Powell was trying to push it up towards 4.5. The current president at the time really just laid into him for it. He wanted those interest rates really low. And here's the reason, right? The single biggest mover on a normal market where it's a slow news cycle, let's just say, in a normal market, the single biggest mover of the economy is the interest rate, because the interest rate directly influences how much money or how fast the money is going to move in an economy. And here's why. When the interest rates are lowered, it's not done for, let's say, residential real estate purposes, right? They're not doing it for me. They're not doing it for you, frankly. They're doing it so that businesses can go and loan more money to do projects. So a good example of that is, the H1 plant, the Hummer plant in Detroit, which I think is called the 11111 plant, or whatever that is, right? When interest rates are down around 4% or 4.25, businesses are much more likely to say, you know what? I am going to get a loan and do a $40 billion investment. And I believe that plan specifically was an $80 billion investment to retool, to bring it up to now, up to today's standard, today's manufacturing standard, so they could put out that Hummer, which is good because they chose to do it here in the United States and build it here in the United States, which does two things. One, it provides great paying jobs just doing the plant itself. Two, it provides great paying jobs that stay here building the vehicle itself, which is great. And then those jobs, of course, we get the basic economics. Those jobs, of course, once those people are paid, they go out and they buy a fridge, and the person that makes fridges can now go out and buy a car, and the person that makes cars can go out and buy clothing, and the person that makes clothing. I mean, that's just how the economy works. The definition, I think politicians forget this, the definition of a good economy is not how much money is in the economy, it's how fast the money is going in a circle, right? Now, the reason why interest rates needed to go up is because A, we were in a very bull market. We were in a very hot market, economically speaking. We've been in a hot market for real estate for almost 10 years, right? Our economic expansion was going on 14 years, which is the longest period in U.S. history. Now, these are not bad things. What was becoming an issue was how fast the economy was increasing. Because before we had the Fed, before we had all of these different levers that could be pulled by the government, the economy was going like this for 100 years, right? And there were massive swings, and the swings were happening every 2, 3, or 4 years from the late 1700s all the way up to the early 1900s. Now, that frequency, let's say, that frequency rate, that band has slowed down and has elongated out. So these last 6 decades, you see like, yeah, sure, the economy does this. We all know what happened in 2008, but it does it much slower, and it does it within a more predefined bandwidth. And what I'm talking about here is the recession of the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s, right? They weren't as bad as the 20s and late 20s, 30s. And of course, we had another issue that was pushing down, which frankly was largely controlled by the Fed, unfortunately, pushing down on the economy that led up to a crash in 2008. Now, the reason why it was important for the Fed at that time to raise interest rates, which they did not, is because as you raise the interest rates, you're slowing down the stress it puts on the economy, the supply chains and all that, the stress it puts on employment, all of that, saying, hey, okay, business lending, let's take it down a notch because we don't have the employees with which to actually complete the projects, right? And then that starts causing hyperinflation on the other end because we're putting the stress on the supply chains, which we've never really seen that stress really come to bear outside of, let's say, the early 90s, except now. This is the first time we've seen it, frankly, in our economic lifetimes, right? Not a lot of our politicians, but for the people on this call, like Mark and myself, we've not seen these supply chains like they were under stress since the early 90s. And frankly, we were kids. And even then, let's go back to the 70s and look at the oil crisis, right? Which is essentially a supply chain issue, but it was one that was manufactured by oil-producing countries, OPEC, right? Oil-producing economic countries. At 4.25, at 4, at 3.9, even at 4.5, when COVID hit, the Fed really didn't have a lot of place to move. Now, they did move, right? Because the government, this time, unlike the 2008 recession, sprang into action. And here's what this looks like versus then. Then in 2008, it took them almost two full years to inject money into the economy to try to shore it up and save it. And at the time, they injected roughly $700 billion plus, I don't know, a couple $100 million for the car manufacturers. It was a drop in the bucket. It was this time in the economy, they injected, 1.4 trillion, and they did it in the matter of weeks, not months, not years, weeks, right? And they did it in such a way, again, guys, nothing is perfect, but they did it in such a way where they tried to give the money and put the money, hey, Mark, how you doing? Hey, we got a couple of Marks on today. They did it in such a way to try to get the money into the hands of both Americans and the frontline small businesses that were most impacted, that were paying Americans, frankly, like myself, through PPP loans, which is great. That was one bullet in the chamber that they could do, right? You print money, you give it out, right? Now, the problem with that, of course, is it pretty much causes automatic inflation. It just shows up a year later, and that's exactly what we saw. Second way to shore up an economy, and there's only 3 ways. There's only 3 ways the government can positively impact a failing economy. So I want to go back and say that. Second way, which they did, lower interest rates. Simple enough. Lower interest rates. Because if interest rates go down, right, and let's say that car financing goes from 3% to 0%, or home financing goes from 4.25 to 3, or business financing goes from 4.5 to 3.5 or 3.25, everybody's going to run into the market and start spending what money they do have to get the things that they want. Because don't forget, guys, even in a bad economy in the United States, we have the majority of people actively employed and getting paychecks from companies. And here's what I mean by that. At the worst of COVID, we saw unemployment touch on 17%. Touch, right? But that also means that 83% of people were still receiving paychecks from companies. 83%. The goal of the low interest rate is to push the 83% into buying things and doing things so that other companies would go and re-employ that 17%, which is exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. We had a 90-day recession, fastest in our history. That's what happened. So, leading all this up, right? Oh, third way that a government can push back against a failing economy: employ more people. So, injecting money into the economy through stimulus packages, causing people to spend more money. Let's go buy that car, honey, because the car payment dropped $60. Buying the car puts General Motors workers to work, or whomever, and all that money flows in a circle, right? Or buy the clothing, or let's move up the house. And in doing so, we have to get it painted and carpeted and this and that, which employs people, which employs the manufacturers, which employs the people actually installing the carpet, right? In the local economies. So there's that. Third way is employ people. Now, we saw that happen in, let's call it 1932 to 1936, right? 34. So FDR at the time, he was president, and he was, again, we had the Great Depression roaring, right? Which the Great Depression hit around 25%, to put it in perspective, 25% unemployment. And he came out with what was called alphabet soup. So that included a couple of different stimulus packages injecting money into the economy, and we know that today is Social Security. They also put in things like the Forster Project, right, where they were employing rangers to go out into the forest and watch our natural resources and watch our parks and go and actually hike them and make sure there's no forest fires and make sure things are clean and make sure things are getting done. So the federal government employed 2.5 million people, right, put into work a sum total of 2.5 million people at one point in time over 2 years. And those people started receiving paychecks. And those paychecks, they went and bought food. And the guy that was growing the food was like, great, I need more hands to grow the food. The hands that grew the food went and bought a house. And the guy that went and bought a house said, I need a fridge. And then all of a sudden, the fridge makers were getting back to work. Our unemployment was coming down. Now, history tells us that it was World War II that got us out of the Depression, because that was literally an 11-year depression. It was a long depression, right? And it was coming down. And had there been no World War II, and had FDR's measures been left in place, we would have been out of the depression, right? Going back to an 8% or below unemployment, roughly 1937, maybe 1938. But here's what happened also. The Supreme Court at that time in the middle 30s said, you know what, FDR, you can't actually do this. It is unconstitutional to give Social Security. It's unconstitutional to create the Forestry Service. It's unconstitutional to build roads. It's unconstitutional to do all of those things. So we're going to take away your ability to do it, right? Now, don't forget, guys, we've got 3 branches of the government, right? The executive office, Congress, legislative, and judiciary, which is effectively the Supreme Court and the court system, right? And the checks and balances say that, hey, the president can say whatever he wants or she wants, right? But power of the purse, legislative has to fund it. So in an emergency, we have things like the War Powers Act, where the president can jump in and say, hey, listen, we're being attacked and we need a singular focus. You know, Lincoln, for example, used the War Powers Act for 4 long years to take control of the military and also take control of the funding of the military, right? More importantly, the funding, right? So the executive branch, the commander-in-chief, is technically the head of the military, but military can't go anywhere if there's no gas in the Jeeps. Fair? Fair. So you had 2 branches of government. You had the executive branch and the legislative branch on point and saying, you know what? This is working. This is a good idea. We're going to give it a shot. Let's get out there and put some money into the economy through employment. Judiciary came back and said, nope. Sorry, guys. Show me in the Constitution where it says the government can employ all of these people for forestry. Show me in the Constitution where we can have a Social Security. Show me in the Constitution where we can do Medicare or Medicaid or any of those programs, right? And then we had what was called FDR's mini recession inside the Great Depression. And there was actually a secondary recession where we were starting to climb and then fail. Bring that back to today. So interest rates drop. Jerome Powell, he was trying to do what was believed by most economists as the right thing by trying to raise interest rates in 2018 and 19 in an effort to have enough leeway so that should something happen, he could drop interest rates, but also not cause hyperinflation. So the goal there is to keep the interest rates around 5 or 6 or 7, what people have been used to before, let's say 2004, 2003, like forever before then. My parents, when they went and got a home, myself, when I got a home, I was at 9%, right? That was my first interest rate. When it dropped to 7, I thought I won the lottery. And at 4.25, the problem is, yeah, you can lower the interest rates. Sure, you can get it down to 2.6 or 2.7 or 2.8, but what you can't do is you can't stop hyperinflation because the money is too cheap. The money is too cheap. And all it's doing is two things. One, it's adding to the top of our national debt at an amazing rate, which is exactly what happened, by the way, because the money's got to come from somewhere. So we went and borrowed it. Again, causing our national debt to go up. And unfortunately, as national debt goes up, our dollar on the national stage continues to get weaker. It just is what it is. Like it's just law. It's just a rule of value, right? The more debt you have, and this is like, think about yourself. Think about the microcosm of just one American, right? If you are out of debt and you've got a fantastic credit score, everybody's knocking at your door to give you money. Government's no different. When you have high debt, right? Nobody's knocking at your door. Your credit score is lowered because you're up to your eyeballs in debt. And people are like, man, I don't know if I want to give these guys money. This guy's value economically has gone down because of the debt load they carry. So over the last, 3 decades, let's say, as our debt load has increased, with one exception where it went down for a few years, but it did fly back up, our value and our credit rating has continued to go down, causing the devaluation of the dollar. And that's true, right? So since the 60s going all the way to now, there were multiple, I'm talking like 24 world currencies that were tied to the dollar, including the yen, right? To this day, the dirham is still tied to the dollar because we were also on the gold standard or the silver standard. So we were backed by some sort of a physical object. And we were the superpower that most countries aligned with, right? Because the other thing you could do is peg it to the ruble, peg it to Russia's currency, which nobody wanted to do, right? At least the Western nations did not. Now, over time, as our value fluctuated and went down on the dollar, more and more countries unhooked their currency from the dollar, causing further devaluation, bringing us all the way back around to the last economy, or to the last economic hiccup, which is COVID. So we had nowhere to go but down, right? The government's already employing a massive number of people. It doesn't matter who is president. The employment by the government has not been higher than this century, like direct employees of the government. So there's nowhere to go there. Putting money into the economy, sure. 1.4 trillion day one, and then they continued to put more and more money into the economy. So that was happening. Third bullet in the chamber to stave off economic disaster, let's lower interest rates and get companies spending money again, which employs people, which is exactly what happened. The unintended consequences, once you go too much below a 3.5 or a 3.25 interest rate, the problem is you also start moving towards hyperinflation, which is where we're at right now. It's where we're at right now. So did the government go into action almost immediately to try to get us up and out of this? Sure they did. I love it. I'm so happy that they did it because I lived through, as a real estate expert, the last economy. It took 4 years to go into and get out of that recession. This one was closer to 90 days. And don't forget, guys, that the definition of a positive and forward-moving economy is unemployment at or below 8%, which again sounds like a big number to us Americans. If you look at the world stage, it's actually a low number. But when economy is expanding, it does so at or below 8% employment, right? 7% is considered great. 4% is considered perfect employment, 100% employment. Below 4%, we've got issues. And that's where we're at, by the way. We're hovering around 3.8, 3.7% unemployment. So here we are at the end of all things, sitting here on a Saturday morning, and we've got one big major news thing that's going to happen that's going to define our economics for the next 4 years, and that's the Fed chair. That's the Fed chair, right? Jerome Powell's appointment is up. They're 4-year appointments, and up until this time, it was largely thought that the current president was going to reappoint Jerome Powell, which actually I thought was a good thing for a number of reasons. One of them being nobody likes him. Like literally. I mean, think about this. Democrats don't like him. Republicans don't like him. So why would that not be? I mean, that sounds horrible to say, but why would that not be a great choice? And again, guys, I'm not going to get into the politics. I'm not going to lean one way or another. That's not what I'm here to do. What I am here to do is say, I think Jerome Powell would have been an effective Fed chair for the next 4 years because he basically told two different presidents from two different parties, listen, you're going down the wrong track. I believe this, so I'm going to try to do this against your will, right? Here's a guy that's classically trained in economics. That's his job. Right? Unlike the politicians, this has been his job for 40 years. And frankly, I think he did, or he at least tried to do an effective job, right? Biden's sitting there saying, you know what? I don't know if I can get this guy appointed because my party doesn't like him and the other party doesn't like him, which is actually the reason why he probably could have gotten him because, one party would have said, you know what? I'm going to vote for him because I know the other guys don't like him more. And the other party could have sat there and said, well, I'm going to vote for him too because the other parties don't like him more for that appointment. Right? Let's approve that appointment, which, frankly, I think Jerome for the next 4 years would have done a great job because he would have slowly inched up those interest rates as he has started doing, and that would have caused the inflation to back off. Because what would have happened is the guy is sitting there and saying, hey, I could buy that next home, right? Like the 5% of Americans or 10% of Americans that honestly, and this is not to hurt somebody, right? This is short-term pain for long-term gain. Those 5% of Americans that said, you know what? At 2.75 or 2.9%, I'm going to buy the home that I don't need, but I like. I'm going to buy the car I don't need, but I like, right? And we're Americans, right? We like to buy the things and have the things. We like the instant gratification. We are a McDonald's society. And those 5% or 10% that would have said, you know what? This is a nice thing to have, but I don't actually need it. At this price, they would have pulled themselves out of the market and said, you know what? I don't necessarily need this right now. So I think I'm going to back off for a couple of years and just see where this goes. And I'll wait and get my raises. I'll wait until I'm a little bit more financially stable, myself and my family is. And then I'll go and buy that house on the hill or that new shiny Cadillac or whatever that looks like, right? Because that has not happened in this economy, which has caused hyperinflation, both for homes over 18 months going up 30% and now for goods. So goods have gone up over 6% in under 12 months. This year, we're not even done with the year yet, and we're at 6.4% inflation, which is considered hyperinflation. Like, don't forget, guys, a perfect inflation is somewhere around 2.7 to 2.9% per year, and that's what it's been over the last 30 years. Inflation has literally doubled on us. And it's doubled because the money's cheap. And because the money's cheap, everybody's buying things. Because everybody's buying things, they're pushing against the supply chain. That was compounded as well by companies' poor choices Q3 and Q4 of 2020 saying, you know what, we don't know what's going to happen, but what we do know is we don't want all this inventory on hand. They thought the economy, and their economists, like General Motors economists, Ford economists, Toyota economists, Apple economists, told them this is going to last about a year longer than it actually did because the government actually did something about it this time, and those measures were at least mildly effective enough to get people buying things again. So let's back this up to now. Number one thing that's going to affect the next 4 years is who is the Fed chair going to be? Now, the alternatives, and there are a couple alternatives, and here's my issue with the alternatives. I'm just going to be honest. My number one issue with the alternatives on the Fed chair is simple. Those guys are less likely to raise interest rates, simply put, and that's going to continue this push of hyperinflation. And I've got a problem with that, right? Now, as a real estate agent, selfishly, do I love there we go. As a real estate agent, selfishly, I love the low interest rates because it's also caused me, think about this. So this year, we're going to end the year 2021 around 6.1 million homes sold, which will be our fourth best in U.S. history, fourth highest number of homes sold. And those homes are also being sold for 30% more than they were 18 months ago. That's fantastic. I mean, think about that. On a per paycheck basis, they're bigger. And there's more of them. Mike Perna likes this. Mark Schaffner likes this. Mark Benson likes this. But the unintended consequences, sometimes when you take too much, and I'm not calling anybody on the Zoom out, but when a smaller group of people take too much, it takes away and becomes a negative for another group of people. And that's what's happening right now. Hence inflation, right? Like if my sales, let's be real, if my real estate team sales went down 10%, would it negatively affect myself and my group? Sure. But if that's what it took to get more Americans into better homes and to get more Americans employed at a better rate or any of those things, I think there's a fair balance and that's a fair trade. I really do. I think even if we went down to from year over year, we saw 24% appreciation, which is ginormous. I mean, 24%, 25%. A home that was worth $400,000 went to $500,000 over the course of 1 year, which is craziness, by the way, guys. But even if we saw, let's say, a 15% appreciation, but we saw inflation coming down a little bit, price of bread, price of clothing, price of canned goods, price of fresh fruit, price of fresh vegetables. If those had just remained a little closer to that 3% or 3.5%, which is still considered a little bit of a high inflation, I would have been okay with that. Because even though my sales or my sales price would have been down a little bit, so my per paycheck earning would have been down a little bit, everything I'm going to buy is down as well. And long term, that just means more Americans that can afford the dream of home ownership, which is becoming more and more elusive as 2021 and unfortunately into 2022 goes on. So now we've got a couple of choices, Mr. President. And again, I'm not talking politics. I'm not saying pro or minus for any of the 25 sides out there. But I will say this. If we continue with these low interest rates, which are wildly popular, we're going to remain in this hyperinflation environment. And all the wage increases in the world are all going to be not only canceled out, but reduced. So the guy that's going to making $50,000 a year that got let's say a 10% wage increase, which that's happened. Let's say they're making $61,000 a year. That's $6,000 in extra, completely canceled out by two things. One, you got to pay taxes on the extra $6,000. So $6,000 isn't $6,000. It's actually $4,000. Let's just be real. Let's just be real with it, right? Or $4,500 or whatever the actual tax rate is for that person. Now that $4,500, look at our gas tanks, look at our pumps, right? Which again has nothing to actually do with the president. It just has to do with supply chains and other things and OPEC and outside factors. But what it does is the price at the pump, the price of gas, the price of schooling, the price of buying a book at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. The prices of all these things are increasing. So that $4,500 that's increased, $380 a month or $350 a month, wiped out. So the average American is actually going negative, not positive. And here's how I know. In September, first time in over 50 years, the top 1% now has more wealth than the middle class, the middle 60% of people. The middle, not even the low 20%. We're taking all those guys out. I'm talking about the middle 60% of Americans now have less wealth than the top 1%. And sure, we saw some amazing valuations come out from Tesla and Rivian. And I mean, just look at the stocks. Look at Apple. Look at all these stocks. We're seeing companies for the first time in the last couple of years, in the last 2 or 3 years, where their valuations start with a T, not a B. Right? This is $1 trillion company. And we're seeing it lap itself. We have several $2 trillion valuation companies. Now, here's why here's how we got here. So the top 1% now have 27% of all American wealth. 1%, 27% of American wealth, right? The middle class, the middle 60% have 26% of all American wealth, right? And again, I'm not begrudging anybody. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just explaining the baseline economics. Right? We need the middle class to have the majority of wealth so that they go and buy things. Like the 1% actually needs the middle class to do better over a long term, but we're not a long-term economy. We're a short-term economy. We're a 2-year economy. We're a 4-year economy. We are no longer a 30-year forecasted economy. People are not looking Apple's not looking out there and saying, hey, I mean, sure, they're saying what products can we put out over the next 10 years or in 20 years. Yes, if you go to Apple right now, if you go to General Motors right now, if you go to any of these companies, they all have 20-year forecasts. Every company does. And it gets more and more vague as time goes on because as time goes on, the variance in technology, the variance in where world economics are, the variance in all of these things are true. But what they do have is they're saying, hey, over the next 2 to 4 years, where can we push profit? And those numbers are more important than 10 years. And we will take advantage of all tax advantages. In fact, we want them. We will take advantage of paying the government $0. We'll take advantage of not paying our fair share. All those things. I'm not advocating either way, but I am saying that at the end of the day, if Jeff Bezos is paying less taxes than me, I've got a problem with that. I'm not saying we should go and take his wealth. I'm not saying we should go and tax the heck out of these guys and put them in the poverty line, because there's a real value to Jeff Bezos himself, because Jeff Bezos also employs millions of Americans. Let's be real. I mean, just during the shopping season, he's looking to employ 175,000 people to own just this winter shopping season, right? Walmart's the same way, added 70,000 employees, right? These are big employers, and these are big machines that need to run to keep our economy going, right? And to employ regular Americans. What I am saying is, it's the regular Americans that go out and go to the grocery stores, because your top 1%, let's put it in perspective. Your top 1%, when they buy a loaf of bread, they're probably going to, I mean, and again, this, I don't know this to be true, I'm just guessing. They're probably not going to buy, the polka dot bread that I did when I was a kid, right? They're probably not buying the mid-grade or low-grade, or just, hey, let's just go get a loaf of bread. They are probably paying exorbitantly more for a loaf of bread than we are, because they want exorbitantly more, or better, or what they perceive to be as a better loaf of bread, or an apple that I might pay $1 for, they might pay $4 for this better apple, right? So sure, they're going to pay a lot more, which also adds money into the economy, but not at the rate of 60 times. Not at the rate of 60 times. They are not paying 60 times more for a loaf of bread. They're not. They're just not, right? So it's not enough money going into the economy from the 1% and those wealth holders. In fact, the top 1% are also known as savers, whereas, no offense to the middle class, because I'm in the middle class, though the middle 60% have become known these last 30 years as non-savers. So even if we put more money into the top 1%, the majority of that money is going to go into a savings account. And what that looks like is stocks, bonds, ETFs, now crypto, and whatever other savings vehicles that there are out there. So that's the other stat I got to bring up. 89% of all stocks, bonds, ETFs, crypto, all of it, essentially are wealth vehicles, right? 89% are now owned by 10%. The top 10% of all Americans. So let's think this through. From the 70s on up, we've had vehicles come into play such as 401ks, SEPs, Roth IRAs. We've had different mechanisms where the government has said, hey guys, it's really good, middle class and lower class, to put money away towards your future, because pensions have been drying up from the 60s on up. Companies have been giving less and less and less pensions. That's not a new thing. That's not a 1990s thing. That's actually a late 1960s thing, right? They're also saying, hey, dollar matching for 401ks is way down. You still have the ability to do a 401k, but the dollar matching by these companies have been cut by 70% over 30 years, right? But we're still going to give you the vehicles, Mr. American, and we want you to use them. But here's the problem. Middle-class Americans are not. Middle-class Americans are not. And there's two reasons why. One, middle-class Americans, and this is not to be offensive to anyone, it's just the truth. I mean, and again, I might be saying something controversial. If I am, throw it in the chat. I'd love to hear an opinion on this. But I believe that middle-class Americans and down are impulse buyers. Simple enough, right? That's not the whole problem. That's just a piece of the problem, right? And I'm not going to exclude myself from that as well. I mean, I have 2 winter coats. Do I need a 3rd winter coat? No. Do I look online for a winter coat when Banana Republic shoots me something and says, hey, check out this winter coat that's on sale? And I'm like, wow, I wanted that color. I've got a brown one and a black one, but I don't have a slate gray one. Yeah, sure. I'm just as bad at that. Do I need a $200 coat? No, I do not. What I need to do is take the $200 and go buy some Tesla stock, or go buy some Apple stock, or put it into a mutual fund, or put it into an ETF, or put it into a dividend producing fund, right? Because over the course of 8 years, we know this with the S&P 500, that money's going to double itself. And then guess what? Take the money out in 8 years and go buy the 3rd coat. That's not the way Americans work. It's just not. Unfortunately, it is just not. We buy the car we don't need. We buy the house we don't need. We buy the food we don't need. We go to the restaurant we don't need. All of it. All of it. And again, tell me I'm wrong, everybody. Tell me I'm wrong. Second, stuff has gotten more expensive. Snapper Dan, you're right. Stores are absolutely physically and psychologically designed for impulse purchases. And we can go back to the 50s for that. If you go back to the 50s and you go back to Kroger versus Five and Dime, Eckerd's, right? Kroger and Eckerd's, they were both in parallel doing great, and then all of a sudden Eckerd's went away. If anybody remembers an Eckerd's, God bless. Eckerd's went away and Kroger just took off like a rocket. And two things that happened. One, people wanted to go to a superstore. They wanted all the things in one place. So Kroger started playing with that concept. Actually, Eckerd did as well, but they were like, nah, I don't think people like this. Kroger was like, no, people love this actually. Our white label stores that we're testing out in the middle of nowhere that don't even know it's a Kroger, people are loving it. So let's just make all of the stores mega stores. And then Meijer came about, and then Walmart came about, and all of those wonderful things, right? So that's number one. Number two, and you're right, Snapper Dan. Number two, they started employing psychologists to study the effect of store layout on purchases. Now, if you go into, let's call it a Meijer, a Walmart, a Kroger, most of them are designed around the same. They're designed around the same. So when I get to a store, I want to buy fruits and vegetables and all those things for my kids, right? This is a basic psychological truth. So I walk in, I grab the cart, there's the fruits and vegetables. There it all is right there, right? So I go through that, right? And I go to the next section, whatever that section is. But then towards the end, you have all the pops and chips and all the impulse purchases because, let's be real, grocery shopping is annoying. It just is, or at least maybe it's just me, but I am annoyed by it. So as it wears on you psychologically, your ability to control your impulse goes down. And so now it's like, you know what? I just want those Doritos. Let's just get them. I don't need them. Let's get them. Let's get two of them and some Mountain Dew. And that's the psychology behind store setup. You're absolutely right. Or that's a very basic run through of that. Let me put it that way. There's a lot more involved with end caps and all of those things. Studied a little bit in college. It was a fascinating thing to study. Where is I going? Right. So middle class, we've got some great investment vehicles available, right? But we have a lack of two things. One, we have a lack of knowledge, right? Because our schools don't teach this. Our schools don't teach this. And that's garbage, by the way, in my opinion. So, and I'm not one of those guys that's like we shouldn't teach algebra in school because the hypotenuse of a triangle is unimportant. I'm not that guy. I am the guy that says there should be a personal finance course in college. And that personal finance course should include things like, here's the compound effect of money versus time. And Mr. 17-year-old, I need you to have this information because if you get out and you go to trade school or you go to college or you go to here, there, wherever it is, and you can start investing at 21 or 22 or 23, you don't need to actually invest that much per year all the way up to 60 or 65 or wherever it is to have a great life and a great retirement. And I know people say, yeah, but I'm going to work forever. Sure you are. That's great. And when we're 20 or 25, who on this call did not feel absolutely invincible at 25? Nope, that'd be no one. We all felt like we were going to live forever. And then what happened? Well, I'm 40 years old, okay? And I'm blessed to have great health. I'm blessed to still be running marathons and half marathons and all of those things, right? In addition to that, my mother is a mess. She planned for that? No. I know people that are my age that are starting to become diagnosed with heart disease. I mean, higher risk of dying from a heart attack. Was that planned? No. No one at 25 said, you know what? I got a good run, but at 45 or 50, I'm going to get that heart disease or cancer or MS or at 50s or 60s, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And all of that cost that skyrockets back up. You know what? I better start investing now because of these diseases that are out there in the world, right? And they're horrible, but they're there. And you have to plan for this stuff. Because it's actually, if you take all of that and combine it, it's a high percentage of people that need to have financial security that don't. Period. And that just makes the situation worse, right? So over the next 4 years, we've got some options, right? Coming out of the executive branch and legislative branch. They get to appoint a Fed chair, right? And that Fed chair can essentially do one of two things. And depending on who they're appointing, depending on their economic belief, we know what those one or two things are going to be. They're either going to raise interest rates, which is going to hurt me in the short term. And you know what? That's okay. Delayed gratification is not a bad thing, people. It's not. It's not. In this world, we want instant gratification. 24-year-olds want to go out and drive the Lambo instead of work for it, right? And again, I'm not trying to be offensive. Just is what it is. One Fed chair has historically wanted to raise interest rates, and he still does. And he's mentioned it 3 times in 4 months outside of Jackson Hole in Washington. Every speech he's given, hey, I'm going to wind down economic stimulus, and what that means is, I'm going to wind down economic stimulus, and what that means is, I'm going to wind down economic stimulus, and what that means is. So he's been preparing us since middle of July that, hey, this is what's going to happen, guys. This is what's coming down the road. You want to go buy a house? Do it now, because interest rates will not be like this a year from now. Why? Because we don't need them to be. We need them to be up here because we need to slow down inflation, right? And I do believe that Janet Yellen is wrong when she says we can slow down inflation and keep interest rates low. Clearly, it doesn't work that way because when interest rates went low, inflation skyrocketed. Interest rates went up, inflation went down. Simple enough. It just is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, the correlation has been proven out over 50 years. So just do the right thing and get interest rates up to 4%. And I'm not saying move it tomorrow because that would literally crash the economy. Literally. It would dead stop the economy for like 120 days while we all readjusted to the new reality of higher interest rates. What I'm saying is let's start inching them up an eighth and a quarter at a time. So in a year from today, I would like to see interest rates at 4%. And again, guys, I understand how much this is going to hurt myself and my business because my business is directly tied to interest rates. But what it will do is it will slow real estate appreciation. It will slow inflation. And that's good for your average American. Good for your average American. We think about this. Our billionaires during this entire time, on average, their wealth gain was 28%. Gain. Did your wealth go up 28% in the last 12 months? Nope. Did your retirement accounts go up 28% other than maybe some stock fluctuations? Nope. Not like these guys did. And I'm saying like a guy that is worth, I don't know, $1 billion made $280 million in 12 months. Craziness. This is literal craziness and madness, in my opinion, right? But we all love the song and we all love the dance. So now we have a very inflated Dow, right? So it used to be you want to buy stocks that have a price earnings ratio of, let's call it 8 to 14. So the price of the stock was 8 to 14 times the earnings. And Mark and anybody else that's in real estate on here, think about rental properties, right? When we were taught when you buy a rental property, you want to be able to pay off that rental property with the rents in 14 to 18 years. That was the multiple. Fair, right? The average American company is now trading at a multiple of just above 36 and growing. 36. So now the price of the stock is 36 times the earnings, right? The point of the stock is you own a piece of a company that produces income, not revenue, net income, right? And that net income goes back in your pocket in 1 or 2 forms. In the forms of dividend, 3 forms. Dividends, K1 income, if you're like a majority owner of the company and all of those things, right? Like if you own an actual small business, you want to take K1 income, or price appreciation of the stock. But it can't just keep going up forever, right? I mean, we're talking back in 2013 and 14 when the price of Tesla was hitting 300 or 400. People were like, this is insane. This is an insane valuation. Even in 16, Elon Musk at 500 a share was like, this makes no sense, guys. And then it split. And then it continued to go up to 1,000, right? Even Elon Musk said, this is unruly. This makes no sense. And then the stock went up 8 times more than that day, right? So the other Fed chair appointment that could happen is very lax. It's very like laissez-faire. Like, hey, you know what? Market's going to do what the market's going to do. And we're just going to keep interest rates low because that's what's popular, right? Who saw Wicked? Right? Remember the song Popular by Elsa? Not Elsa. Whatever her name is. Right? The one that was the blonde that had the sister, the house was dropped on the sister and blah, blah, the Wicked Witch. Right. They were in grade school and she had the song Popular and that's all she wanted to be was popular. And everybody in the audience laughed because it made no sense. But that's the song our politicians have been singing for 30 years, 40 years. I want to be popular. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know the words. But point of it is, our politicians, unfortunately, and this, again, it's not a side, it's a truth. have been thinking in 2 and 4 year increments from the 70s on up, from the late 70s on up, because they're thinking in terms of when can I get reelected, not what's actually good for the American people, right? If our politicians were actually thinking from the space of what's good for the American people, neither party would be right about half of everything they do, period, right? Let's be real. We know climate change is happening and we know our infrastructure sucks. So yeah, we need to run towards that. We also know we need to support our businesses, right? Especially our small businesses and middle businesses, which are our major employers in the US. And we need to do so through making sure that their tax rates are not crushing them versus the rest of the world, so they can go and employ more people. These are both truths, but you have different politics that are feeding on the emotions of the American people to get them to the ballot box to go the way that they want them to go. If you go back 50 years and start looking, and I challenge anybody to do this, go back from, let's say, the mid 50s up to LBJ. Let's say Lyndon B. Johnson. Let's say through that even up to 1980. Look at the votes that were happening by the politicians that represented each party, right? And these were people that believed in Americans and believed that America could do great works, right? And great undertakings. These were the people that believed we can put a man on the moon and then did. These are the people that believed, hey, we're going to create the largest inland water that's ever been created in history of the world and then do it. The Hoover Dam, Lake Mead. I'm not even kidding. Like, these were people where wonder was the currency. What could be? What could we do if we got together on things? All of that is gone by both frankly parties, in my opinion. And we're spending so much damn time infighting, right, about these little things that happen in today in 2 and 4 year increments, because that's what we're being trained to do from our politicians, which is why we vote that way, which reinforces the politician's decision to do such things, which it's a doom loop. It's not a flywheel, it's a doom loop, right? So all of these things are happening right now, right? In the background, research. The American government used to put roughly 8% of our total GDP, not 8% of what they took in taxes, 8% of our total economy, which is a massive amount of taxes, by the way, went into research. That's how we got to things like the moon. Just is what it is. Right now, we're under 1%. We're under 1%. And you've got other economies in the world, and I will name it. You've got places like China, which are, again, above 6% and trending towards 12%. They're actually increasing their government funding into research, right? And they're laughing at us. They're like, oh my gosh, look at the Americans over there. They're just infighting. They have it all, and they're willing to lose it all because they're bickering. Because they can't figure out what direction the rudder of the boat should point the boat in. So the Americans are just going in circles and going in circles and going in circles. Our greatest, this is not a new thing. Our greatest export over the last 30 years has been our tech. Somebody tell me I'm wrong. Literally, somebody tell me I'm wrong. iPhone, Android, laptops, semiconductors, all of those things. Our greatest thing that we can export to other countries and make massive amounts of dollars bringing into this country has been our tech. You think China doesn't have that tech now? And sure, there can be an argument made, I'm sure, for all the conspiracy theories in the world saying, hey, they went and stole it. Okay. Sure. Conspiracy theory away. But here's the reality. They had 30 years to catch up to our research, just catching up to our research. I'm not kidding. Because our funding of said research by both businesses and the government has been minimal. Theirs has been apocalyptic, like amazingly huge. And here's an example of this. LTE, okay? We became the world leaders of LTE, but we only did so with government assistance because AT&T and Verizon and Sprint and all of those other companies combined could not roll out LTE. And that's what the market called for. So LTE was discovered, those bandwidths were discovered. Everybody wanted fast internet. People were willing to pay for faster internet on these devices right here that capture our interest every day. We spend hours on them. But at the end of the day, There was no company in the world or conglomerate of companies that could fund it. So the American government put $500 billion in the form of a loan to say, you know what, we'll build it out, guys. And then guess who got hired to do it across the world? Americans, American companies. So that $500 billion investment by America, the government, brought in an estimated $2.2 trillion in taxes over 15 years, right? Because we sold our boxes, we sold our radio frequency stations, we sold even the rights to put them in ourselves. And now we got 5G. And nobody can afford to deploy it at a high level. But what we do have is we have AT&T that tells me I have 5G, but it's not 5G. But what we do have is we have China that's coming out and saying, hey guys, guess what? We can help you out. Italy, you need 5G to get your economy back on track that's been off kilter for 20 years? Here, stroke me a nice check. I will send my engineers. I will manufacture it myself inside of the country. I will ship all that stuff. It's called One Belt Road. Look it up. And I will go ahead and I will do your nation building for you for a price and a profit. What we used to do. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I just soapboxed for like 51 minutes. Anyway, getting back to it. So 2022, yeah, sure. We're going to see a great real estate market because the interest rates will probably be kept low because the Fed appointee will probably just do that. If you haven't bought a house, buy a house. If you haven't refinanced, refinance. If you got an interest rate above 3.5%, refi now. If you haven't made that purchase, but you're sitting on the fence, please do so before March or April. Please just do it for your families, right? Just do it. Secondary, pick a bill. Literally pull up your credit card statements, wherever they are on your phone, probably log in, look at them and say, hey, is there $10 a week, $40 a month that I don't need to spend? Like, really? Do I need to buy crap inside a Candy Crush? Do I need a Starbucks coffee? Do I need it? Need? Because we are trading a Starbucks coffee for today's gratification for the future of not only ourselves, but our children. Because guess what, guys? Actuary rates and actuary science is the science of how long people live. Actuary rates are wrong. And we knew that 30 years ago. So financial planners are basing your death rate on today's death rate. But as medical advances have occurred, our lifespan has gotten 15 and 20 years longer from the time that my dad hit the workforce and he was being advised by financial planners to today. And I know that because at that time, his parents and his parents' parents were passing away in their 50s and 60s. And he's almost 71 years old and he's still climbing on roofs, installing crap as an electrician. My grandmother lived to 94. So this is what this looks like. Because we're choosing the Starbucks coffee today, we're also making a second choice. We're not investing, but the result and effect of that choice is our children, and I'm talking to you, Gen Xers, and frankly, upper millennials like myself, the result is our children are going to write that check just like our parents are writing that check right now for their parents. And don't believe that they didn't. I know for a fact, every time my dad went and got groceries or picked up medicine or did whatever for my grandmother, right? He didn't go to my grandmother and say, hey, can you give me the $20 back? Can you give me the $40 back? Can you give me $30 for the prescription back? What I did do was I ran through because I was curious. I ran through for a year and found that my dad was spending 15 to 20 grand a year on my grandmother, supporting her. And that's light because that wasn't like home. That wasn't like in a home. That wasn't at-home care. She was extremely healthy right up to 93. It was only that last year that she really actually needed assistance, which was expensive, by the way. But what she did not have was savings to support her for that lifespan. So for the last 15 years, think about this. 15 grand is a lot of money. You know where I'm going. This is a foregone conclusion. 15 grand is a lot of money. And a lot of Americans cannot afford to just come out of pocket with an extra 15 grand, let alone per year for 10 to 20 years. Because now we're talking about 150 to 180,000. More than that. Guys, do one thing this week. Open up your credit card statements. Pick one thing that was a nice to have but not a need to have that you can replace at a lower cost and find $10 per week and put it into some sort of an account, an Ameritrade, an E-Trade, I don't care what. Just Google Dow Jones 500 mutual funds or Russell 500 index funds. Doesn't matter, because over a long period of time, and most of us have still a long period of time, we're going to see that go up, go down, and go back up. It might go down and go back up, depending on your age. But what I do know is this. Traditionally, inflation is at 3%. Traditionally, the Dow, the Russell, the Nikkei, all of these other indexes grow at 7%. So your money is going to grow 4% faster than the devaluation of it. And time is a function of money, right? And then next month, find another $10 and just do it. Just do it. Start bringing up these calculators. Start questioning what you've been told about savings. Start questioning what you've been told about the markets. Start questioning about wealth creation and wealth advancement in America. It's not the TikTokers out there. It's not the guy that goes and invents something, because those are the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. How you create wealth in America is you start young, you put a couple of bucks away, you do it consistently. Berkshire Hathaway. Seriously. Warren Buffett. That's it. Go pick up The Psychology of Money and go get it at the library so you're not buying it and you can return it, because it's a quick and one read, and you don't need to spend money on it. Take that money, put it in some sort of investment. Warren Buffett. The only reason why the guy is the best investor on the planet, because he is not, I mean, in any 10-year period, in any 5-year period, he's not in the top 100 of fund investor returns. He's not. He's a good investor. He's not a great investor. But what he did was he was also a consistent investor over 80 years. The guy has literally been investing for 3/4 of a century. I'm 40, right? I've been investing for 20 years. I started investing at 20, right? The guy's got almost 60 years on me at this point investing. Compound effect of money. Whose pile is going to be bigger? Doesn't even matter what you start with. Whose pile is going to be bigger? His. He's got 60 years of compounding at 7% average on me. And he's more like 15% because he's a good investor. All right, guys. Need to buy a home, sell a home, give me a call, 248-886-4450. Got a referral from Metro Detroit. If you're an agent on here, same number. Shoot me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me a messenger, shoot me all those wonderful things. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. YouTube/Michael Perna TV. Make it a great day, guys. I'm going to go catch a plane. Get my butt home.